My name is Vantik Rowe. I was a fleet chronicler for the Caliph Dominion. My job was simple. I watched. I listened. I wrote down what happened, so our leaders could read it later. I did this job on a large warship called the Ashen Verdict. Out of 4,000 people on that ship, only 11 of us made it home. I am one of them. I am not writing this story to make my people look good. There is no Dominion left to impress. I am writing it as a warning. Somewhere out in space, another fleet is looking at another quiet little world. They are reading the same kind of reports we once read. They are about to make the same mistake we made. I want to stop them before it is too late. So let me tell you exactly how it all began. The Caliph Dominion had grown very powerful over many years. Before we ever heard of Earth, we had already taken control of 41 other worlds. Every single time, the pattern was the same. We would show our strength early and hit hard. The other side would give up quickly, afraid of losing even more than they already had. It worked every time, without fail. So when our scout ships found a quiet blue and green planet called Earth, none of us were worried at all. Let me describe my own people for a moment, so the difference is clear. The Caliph are tall, with hard gray shells covering our backs and arms, and 4 strong limbs built for both climbing and fighting. We fought many wars on our own homeworld, long before we ever reached the stars, and those wars taught us one simple rule: the strong survive, and the weak serve them. To us, this was never a cruel idea. It was simply how the universe worked, as far as we had ever seen. This is why the report about Earth surprised no one on our ship. A soft, single-hearted species with no shell and no claws fit perfectly into everything we already believed. Our scanners studied the creatures living there closely. The report said humans were weak. They had soft skin instead of a hard shell like ours. They had no claws and no natural armor. They had only one heart, and it seemed to struggle under too much stress. Prime Marshal Keswick Thane, the leader of our fleet, read this report out loud to the whole crew. Then he laughed. "A creature that feels pain this easily," he said, "will beg us to stop very quickly." Everyone on the bridge laughed along with him. I wrote his words down, because that was my job. We decided not to attack the human homeworld first. Instead, we picked a smaller target, just to send a clear message. There was a small mining colony near the edge of human territory, called Meridian's Reach. About 11,000 people lived there, digging rare metal out of the ground. It was a quiet, simple place, far from any major cities. We believed that if we took control of it quickly, the humans watching from a distance would understand our strength and give up without much trouble at all. We moved in fast. Before the colony's leaders could even respond to our first warning, we had already taken control of their defense systems and their main buildings. It was over within a single day. We captured many of the miners and told the rest that their families would be released if they simply went back to work under our control. This was the moment I first began to feel that something was wrong. The prisoners did not behave the way frightened people usually behave. They did not cry. They did not argue among themselves or beg for kindness. Instead, they stayed calm, too calm. It felt like they were quietly waiting for something. I remember one woman very clearly. She had worked as an engineer before we captured her. A guard tried to threaten her, hoping to scare useful information out of her. Instead of looking afraid, she simply smiled at him. "You should let us go now," she said quietly. "It will go easier for you if you do." The guard laughed at her, the same way Thane had laughed earlier at the report. I wrote her words down, but at the time, I did not understand why they mattered so much. Very soon, I understood completely. The tunnels beneath the colony became a real problem for us. The miners knew every twist and turn of those tunnels by heart. We did not. Our armor was built for open battles in wide spaces, not narrow underground paths. It was too heavy and too slow down there. Slowly, and then more quickly, small things began to go wrong. Supply carts disappeared between stations. Guards posted at checkpoints were later found alone and disarmed, completely unharmed but very confused, with no memory of how it had happened. It felt as if quiet ghosts were slowly taking our whole operation apart, piece by piece. One night, I was asked to review a recording from a checkpoint near the eastern tunnels. 3 guards had been posted there only hours earlier. When the next shift arrived, all 3 were sitting quietly against the tunnel wall, with their weapons stacked neatly beside them, completely unharmed. None of them could explain what had happened. One guard told me in a shaking voice that he had simply turned around, and someone was already standing close behind him before he could even raise an alarm. He said she did not look angry at all. She only said, very softly, "Sit down, please." And somehow, he did exactly that. I remember writing his words down and feeling, for the first time since we had arrived, a small, cold feeling in my chest that I did not yet have a name for. We had taken 41 worlds using nothing but strength and numbers. Yet this one small colony, full of soft-skinned miners, with no weapons and no armor, was slowly wearing us down day after day. And through all of it, they never once asked us for mercy. Then, after several days, our sensors picked up human ships approaching from deep space. A real fleet, not just local defenders. We assumed they were coming to talk terms with us. We were completely wrong. Our reinforcement fleet, 400 ships strong, was already on its way from a distant waypoint. Based on the distance, we expected it would take about 11 days to arrive. That gave us plenty of time, or so we believed, to strengthen our position before anything serious happened. But the human counterfleet moved far faster than we had ever expected. It took them only 6 days to reach us. They did not arrive the way we expected either. Our sensors had marked a large field of broken rock and metal near the colony as too dangerous to cross safely. The human fleet passed straight through it without any trouble at all. We had also marked a nearby radiation band as deadly to any living crew. They crossed that too, seemingly unaffected. Somehow, they already knew the exact location of our supply ships, almost as if they had been watching us from the very beginning. Later, we learned the full truth, and it was hard to accept. A few of the miners we thought we controlled had been quietly sending information about our positions to the approaching fleet this entire time. No one had forced them to do it. They chose to do it calmly, all while pretending to cooperate with us. By the 9th day of the counterattack, Prime Marshal Thane had lost more than half of his ships. Every path out of the system was being watched closely by human forces. I want to be fair to him here. He was not a coward. He looked at the situation honestly, the same way I had been recording it for him day after day, and he understood there was only one real option left. He opened a channel to the human fleet and asked for mercy. He offered to pull every one of our remaining ships completely out of the system. He offered to return every single prisoner, unharmed. He even offered a large payment, more than we had ever given to any other species we had defeated before, because for the very first time in the history of our dominion, we were the ones who needed a deal to be accepted. I recorded that message myself. Foolishly, I believed it would work. Every other species we had ever defeated had accepted a similar deal gladly, simply relieved to survive. I remember thinking, why would humans, who seemed so fragile and so easily hurt, choose to keep fighting when they could just take everything we offered and let us leave in peace? The answer arrived 4 hours later. It did not come from a diplomat. There was no warning signal before it happened. No engine flash, no shape that our sensors recognized approaching from any direction. One moment, the space beside our ship, the Ashen Verdict, was completely empty. The next moment, a single dark ship was simply there, sitting quietly inside a defense zone that had already stopped 3 other attacks that same week. Our sensors never even detected it getting closer. To this day, I still do not understand how it managed to cross that distance completely unseen. 6 figures came aboard our ship. They did not rush through the halls the way our own soldiers would have done, shouting at every closed door. Instead, they moved quietly and calmly, as if they already knew this ship better than most of my own crew did. 3 of our Marines raised their weapons at them the moment they stepped inside. I am told all 3 of those Marines are alive today, held safely somewhere on Earth. I do not know exactly how they were stopped so quickly, but not one of them managed to fire a single shot. Their leader never told us her name. I want to describe her carefully, because paying close attention was my entire job aboard that ship. She looked completely ordinary to me. She was shorter than Prime Marshal Thane. She wore no special armor and no visible enhancements, and she carried only a small device at her side. What I remember most clearly is how calm she was. It was a kind of calm that made my hands shake more than any attack ever had. She was not angry. She did not seem pleased with the moment either. She simply looked at Thane the way someone looks at a difficult problem that still needs to be solved correctly. "You attacked the colony's homes before you even tried to talk with them," she said. "Many innocent people were hurt because of that choice. and you never gave them a real chance to respond peacefully first. Thane tried to explain himself. He spoke about the old rules of war he had always followed, about the generous deal he had already offered, about how accepting mercy now would be the wisest choice for everyone involved, now that the situation had clearly changed. It is the wisest choice, she agreed calmly. For everyone who did not give the order to attack those homes. Later, during the long and quiet journey back, I finally understood something the prisoners used to say, something I had heard many times but never understood. They used to whisper a simple phrase to each other whenever they thought no one else was listening. The monsters will come. At first, I assumed it was just a story they told each other for comfort, something to hold on to while they waited. It was not just a story. It was completely true. It was a plain description of a special group within Earth's forces. I was never given their official name. I only know that every human on that colony seemed to know they existed, and seemed to trust, calmly and completely, that they would eventually come if something happened that truly could not be ignored. Earth had not sent them to conquer anyone. Earth sent them only when something had happened that needed to be answered properly. What happened next was not the harsh punishment that Thane's own rules would have demanded if our positions had been reversed. This is the part I most want the Dominion to understand, even though it is the part I still find hardest to explain, even to myself. Our fleet was not destroyed. The crew members who had not been involved in the attack on the colony's homes, who had simply followed orders without knowing the full truth behind them, were disarmed, transported safely, and eventually allowed to return home. They were shaken, changed by what they had seen, but alive, and able to share this story with the rest of the Dominion, alongside me. There was no public display of punishment meant to frighten anyone watching from a distance. Instead, something happened that felt even stranger to those of us raised on Caliph values. There was a proper trial. Records were taken carefully, specific names were connected to specific choices, and specific consequences followed those choices, carried out with a patience that felt far more lasting than any quick punishment ever could. Prime Marshal Keswick Thane was taken into custody. I do not know what became of him after that, and I may never find out for certain. I only know that the woman without a name looked carefully at everything that had happened on that colony, and she did not need anger to respond to it properly. She simply made sure everything was handled fairly and carefully, and then she allowed the rest of us to go home and think deeply about everything we had learned. I believe that is the true meaning behind the word monster, at least to them. It does not mean cruelty. Our own Dominion already understood cruelty extremely well, and it had never once cost us a war before this. What truly defeated us this time was a species that had clearly struggled through far greater hardships than we ever had, long before we arrived. I later read small pieces of human history that our own intelligence teams had gathered before contact with the Ashen Verdict was completely lost. Their history was full of harsh winters, difficult sickness, and long struggles that tested them again and again, generation after generation. They were a people who had already faced the real chance of losing everything, many times over, long before a group of strangers from deep space ever arrived to threaten them with that very same thing. I have thought about those old records many times since. A weaker species, faced with such a long history of hardship, might have given up on itself completely by now. Humans did not. Somehow, every hard winter and every difficult year seemed to make them steadier instead of weaker. I do not fully understand how that is possible. I only know it is true, because I watched the result of it firsthand. There is one more thing I remember clearly from those final days, something small that has stayed with me ever since. Before the woman and her team left our ship, one of our younger crew members, still just a boy by our own counting, asked her a question. He wanted to know why she had not simply destroyed us all, when she clearly had the power to do so, and when our own fleet would have done exactly that in her place without a second thought. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because that is not who we choose to be," she said. "Power is easy. Choosing what to do with it is the hard part." I did not understand her answer then. I think I am only beginning to understand it now, long after it was given. You cannot easily frighten a people who stopped being afraid of endings a very long time ago. All you can really do is hope they choose to treat you fairly when the moment finally comes. Ours did. When we finally returned to Dominion space, many refused to believe my report at first. Some accused me of being changed by the humans somehow, of losing my nerve, or of exaggerating a defeat just to excuse our failure. I understand their anger. I once would have said the same thing, in their place. But I recorded everything exactly as it happened, the same way I always have, and I stand by every word of it now. My name is Vantik Rowe, and I am told I was allowed to survive, specifically so that this account could be written down, somewhere deep in the Dominion's own records, before another commander reads a report calling some quiet little world weak and harmless. There needs to be someone saying clearly, look again, more carefully, before you decide anything. We mistook their gentleness for weakness, and we were wrong about nearly every part of that idea. They did not answer our harsh actions with something even harsher in return. They answered with something far more surprising instead, a calm and steady patience, along with a quiet promise that things would always be handled fairly, no matter how loudly anyone begged otherwise. 41 worlds had taught the Dominion that mercy was something you could always find, as long as you asked for it loudly enough. Earth taught us something very different. Some doors only open from the other side, and what waits behind them is decided by fairness, not by how well you beg for forgiveness. We pleaded for mercy. Their monsters came instead. I am told that, on Earth, a story like this one is not even considered unusual. I am told it is simply an ordinary day,